An HOA thought she was just a farmer. They illegally sold her family's century-old land to a developer, thinking she wouldn't fight back. They were wrong. She didn't just hire a lawyer to get her farm back. She engineered a hostile takeover. You won't believe the epic move she made next. It's a masterclass in revenge. Sold? What do you mean, sold? The word felt alien on Amelia Thorne's tongue, a bitter, metallic taste. She stood before a large, garish sign that had been violently hammered into the rich, dark earth of her family's land. The sign depicted a smiling, soulless family waving from the porch of a house that didn't exist. Under the brand Oakwood Creek Estates, Phase 2. And below it, in big, bold letters, sold, for over a century. This 200-acre tract of rolling North Carolina hills had belonged to the Thornes. It was land her great-grandfather had cleared by hand, land her father had farmed until his hands were too stiff to grip a tractor wheel, land where she had spent her childhood chasing fireflies on summer evenings. For the past 3 years, she had leased it to a local organic farming elective while she was away in New York. Liquidating her late father's complicated estate, she had returned just last week, intending to take over the farming operations herself, to finally come home now. A sign was telling her that her home had been sold out from under her, without her knowledge or consent. A quick, panicked call to the farming collective confirmed they had been served an eviction notice a month prior. The seller listed on the notice was not Amelia Thorne. It was the Oakwood Creek Homeowners Association. The Oakwood Creek HOA was the sprawling, 500-home suburban development that bordered the eastern edge of her property. It was a place of manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, and a labyrinth of covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Amelia's farm had always been the wild, untamed border to their pristine world, a source of occasional complaints about tractor noise or the smell of fertilizer, her heart pounding with a cold. Rising fury, Amelia drove to the HOA's community clubhouse. She found the board president, a portly, self-satisfied man named Gregory Abernathy, inspecting the chlorine levels of the community pool. He wore a polo shirt tucked tightly into plaid shorts, the very picture of suburban authority. "Mr. Abernathy," Amelia said, her voice tight but controlled. "My name is Amelia Thorne. You seem to have sold my farm." Abernathy turned, a slow, condescending smile spreading across his face. "Ah, Ms. Thorne, I was wondering when you'd show up. It's not your farm anymore. It's the property of Oakwood Creek." "That's impossible," Amelia stated. "I hold the deed, free and clear. It's been in my family for 110 years. Deeds can be superseded by zoning variances and historical easement claims," Abernathy said dismissively, as if reciting from a script. "Our lawyers conducted a thorough review. A 1968 county zoning map erroneously reclassified your agricultural parcel as community-use green space, attached to the planned Oakwood development. The error was never corrected. For 50 years, your family was technically squatting. We simply rectified the situation and reclaimed the land as per the original master plan. It belongs to the HOA." It was the most audacious, nonsensical legal argument she had ever heard. It was a fiction, a lie crafted to justify a land grab. The HOA, hungry for expansion and the multi-million-dollar windfall from a developer, had manufactured a pretext to steal her legacy. "You're a thief," Amelia said, her voice dropping to a low whisper. Abernathy chuckled. "You'll find the law is on our side. We have the county's seal of approval. The sale is final. The developer, Crestview Homes, takes possession in 60 days. My advice, hire a lawyer. A very, very good one. You'll need him." He turned his back on her, returning his attention to the pool, dismissing her as if she were a fly. Amelia stood there for a long moment, the humiliation and rage churning within her into something cold and hard. He was right about one thing. She would need a lawyer. But as she walked back to her truck, a different kind of plan began to form in her mind. A plan born not just of her love for the land, but from her other life, the one she had just left behind in New York for 15 years. Amelia Thorne had not been a farmer. She had been a senior analyst at one of Wall Street's most ruthless private equity firms, specializing in hostile takeovers and corporate restructuring. She had dismantled billion-dollar companies by finding the single, fatal flaw in their financial armor. She knew how to dissect a balance sheet, how to trace debt, how to find the hidden leverage points that could bring an empire to its knees. Gregory Abernathy saw her as a simple farmer he could bully with fake legal jargon. He had no idea he had just declared war on a predator of an entirely different species. That evening, in a rented office, she didn't call a simple real estate attorney. She called the senior partner at Blackwood and Finch, the legal firm that had handled all of her firm's most vicious corporate battles. "David, it's Amelia Thorne," she said, her voice calm and clear. "I have a situation down in North Carolina. It's a real estate issue, but I don't want a real estate solution." "Amelia," the lawyer's voice crackled over the speakerphone. "Good to hear from you. What do you mean, not a real estate solution?" "I mean," Amelia said, leaning forward, "I don't just want my farm back. This HOA has a board, a charter, assets, and liabilities. It's a corporation, a poorly run one. They think they stole a piece of land. I want to know if it's possible to steal their whole company. I want you to conduct a full forensic audit on the Oakwood Creek HOA. I want to know who financed it, who holds its debt, where every dollar goes. I want to find its jugular. They took my family's past. I want to own their future." There was a pause on the line, then a low chuckle. "A hostile takeover of a homeowners association," the lawyer mused. "I've never heard of it. It's audacious. It's beautiful. Consider it done. We'll find a weapon for you, Amelia, I promise." Amelia hung up the phone. She looked out the window at the distant silhouette of the hills her family had cherished. Abernathy had built his kingdom on stolen ground. He had no idea she was about to execute a leveraged buyout of the entire kingdom, using his own arrogance as collateral. While Amelia activated her legal and financial war machine, Gregory Abernathy was reveling in his victory. He held a celebratory meeting with the Crestview Homes Development team in the HOA clubhouse. Spread across a large table were blueprints and architectural renderings for Oakwood Creek Estates, Phase 2. They depicted a new labyrinth of cul-de-sacs and beige houses, erasing every last trace of the Thorne family farm. "As you can see, the topography allows for an additional 150 premium lots," Abernathy said, beaming at the lead developer, a slick man named Harrison Crane. "The sale has generated a significant windfall for the HOA, allowing us to finally upgrade the community pool to a saltwater system and resurface the tennis courts. It's a win-win. Our legal team was impressed with your board's creative interpretation of the county zoning laws," Crane said, a predatory glint in his eye. He didn't care if the land was stolen. He only cared that the title appeared clean enough for his lenders to sign off on it. "We're set to break ground in 58 days, as long as you're sure there won't be any further complications from the previous owner." "Ms. Thorne," Abernathy scoffed, "she's a farmer. What can she do? She'll file a frivolous lawsuit. Our lawyers will drown her in paperwork for a few years. And by then, your houses will already be sold. Don't worry about her. She's irrelevant." He had no idea that hundreds of miles away, in the glass and steel towers of New York and Charlotte, teams of the country's most expensive lawyers and forensic accountants were swarming over the Oakwood Creek HOA's entire history. They were not looking for a simple weakness. They were looking for a kill shot. Amelia, working from her rented office, had become the commander of a ghost army, directing their efforts with the cold precision of a general. The first reports that came back were interesting, but not decisive. The HOA was financially overleveraged, its reserve funds dangerously low, confirming Amelia's suspicion that the land grab was an act of desperation. There were minor instances of embezzlement in the landscaping budget, courtesy of Mr. Abernathy's brother-in-law, but these were tactical vulnerabilities, not strategic ones. Amelia wasn't interested in winning a skirmish. She wanted unconditional surrender. The breakthrough came 2 weeks into the audit. From a junior analyst in the real estate division of Blackwood and Finch, He was a pale, sleep-deprived young man who had been tasked with the mind-numbing job of tracing the HOA's origins back to its inception in the late 1980s. "I found it," he announced, his voice trembling with the thrill of discovery during a late-night conference call with Amelia and the senior partners. "I found the ghost in the machine." The original developer of Oakwood Creek, a company called Sun Valley Holdings, had gone spectacularly bankrupt in the 1992 recession. In the ensuing chaos, their assets were chopped up and sold off for pennies on the dollar. Most of these assets were worthless unpaid loans. Liens, bad debt, but buried deep within one of these toxic debt portfolios was an asset no one had paid attention to: the master declarant rights for the Oakwood Creek development. In the world of HOAs, declarant rights are the keys to the kingdom. They give the original developer absolute power, the right to appoint the board, to veto any decision, to annex adjacent property legally, this time, and to unilaterally amend the covenants. These rights are supposed to be formally and legally transferred to the homeowners association once the last house is sold. But in the bankruptcy of Sun Valley Holdings, that transfer had never happened. The rights had remained an asset of the defunct developer, a legal ghost that had been bundled with bad debt and forgotten. The Oakwood Creek HOA had been operating for 30 years under the false assumption that they held these powers. In reality, they were a toothless advisory committee with no ultimate authority. "So whoever owns those rights owns the HOA?" Amelia asked, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. "Effectively, yes," the senior partner confirmed, his voice filled with awe. "They are the HOA's legal master. They can fire the board, rewrite the rules, control the finances, anything. The current board is, legally speaking, a powerless puppet government." "And who owns them now?" Amelia's voice was a whisper. "That's the beautiful part," the analyst said, his excitement palpable. "After the bankruptcy, the toxic debt portfolio containing the rights was sold to a larger bank, which then bundled it into a collateralized debt obligation. It was traded, resold, and eventually forgotten. It's currently held by a special purpose vehicle managed by a hedge fund in Delaware that specializes in distressed assets. To them, it's just a line item on a spreadsheet, probably valued at zero. They likely have no idea what they're holding." Amelia leaned back in her chair. The path forward was now brilliantly, beautifully clear. She wasn't going to sue the HOA. She wasn't going to fight them over the farm. She was going to buy them. The next phase was executed with surgical speed and secrecy. Amelia, leveraging her Wall Street connections, made a quiet inquiry to the hedge fund in Delaware. She didn't ask about the declarant rights specifically. She offered to buy the entire portfolio of 30-year-old, nearly worthless debt in which the rights were buried. The fund manager, thrilled that anyone would offer to pay cash for what he considered to be garbage, agreed instantly. For the price of a mid-range luxury sedan, Amelia Thorne acquired a portfolio of worthless loans and one priceless, forgotten legal document. The transaction was completed in less than 48 hours, in a quiet office in Wilmington, Delaware. A single signature on a pants-first document made Amelia Thorne the legal, undisputed, and absolute master of the Oakwood Creek Homeowners Association. Gregory Abernathy just didn't know it yet. Amelia flew back to North Carolina the next day. She walked into the HOA clubhouse, where Abernathy was once again holding court, this time boasting to a few residents about the new saltwater pool. He saw her and his face soured. "I believe I told you not to come back here. Ms. Thorne, you're trespassing." "Actually, Mr. Abernathy, you're the one who is trespassing," Amelia said, her voice calm and level. She placed a single, freshly printed document on the table in front of him. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a notice. It read, "Notice of Special Meeting of the Oakwood Creek HOA. By order of the duly appointed Master Declarant, a special meeting will be held in this room in 48 hours. The agenda will be as follows: the immediate dissolution of the current board of directors. 2. The appointment of a new interim board. 3. The nullification of all contracts entered into by the illegitimate board. including the land sale agreement with Crestview Homes. Abernathy stared at the document, his face turning a mottled shade of red and white. Master declarant, what is this nonsense? The HOA is the master declarant. No, it isn't, Amelia said, looking him directly in the eye. Sun Valley Holdings was the master declarant, and as of 10:32 a.m. yesterday, I acquired all of their remaining assets, including those rights. So I am the master declarant. She allowed herself a small, cold smile. I am the HOA, and you, Mr. Abernathy, are fired. I'd suggest you spend the next 48 hours updating your resume. Now, get out of my clubhouse. The silence in the clubhouse was absolute, broken only by the hum of the pool filter outside. Gregory Abernathy stared at the notice, his face a canvas of disbelief shifting rapidly toward apoplectic rage. The residents who had been listening to his boasts were frozen, their eyes darting between the portly, sputtering man who had been their leader and the calm, unwavering woman who had just deposed him. This is a joke, Abernathy finally stammered, his voice a choked whisper. A fabrication. You can't just buy the rights. The HOA is a sovereign entity. It is a corporation. Mr. Abernathy, Amelia corrected him, her tone as level and dispassionate as an auditor's. A corporation whose foundational legal authorities were never properly secured. An oversight that has now been rectified. I own the declarant rights. I am, for all legal intents and purposes, the sole and final authority here. Your board is a tenant, and I am the landlord. Your lease has expired. I'm calling our lawyers, Abernathy roared, fumbling for his phone. They'll bury you. This is fraudulent. Please do, Amelia said, gesturing to the phone. I imagine they'll want to review the documents my legal team has already forwarded to them. The transfer of assets is ironclad. While you're at it, you might ask them to explain the concept of personal liability for a board director who knowingly sells an asset they don't legally own. I believe Crestview Homes paid a $10 million advance. I'm curious to know where that money is now. Abernathy's face went white. The bravado evaporated, replaced by a sudden, stark terror. He hadn't just been caught. He had been vivisected, his every misdeed laid bare by a surgeon he hadn't even known was in the room. He turned and fled the clubhouse, not walking, but stumbling, a defeated king abandoning his castle. The 48 hours leading up to the special meeting were a period of frantic, behind-the-scenes chaos for the now leaderless HOA board, and one of quiet, methodical preparation for Amelia. The HOA's lawyers confirmed the catastrophic news to the board members in a series of panicked phone calls. The declarant rights were real. They were owned by Thorne, and the board's authority was, and always had been, an illusion. Their land sale to Crestview was void. They were exposed, powerless, and facing a tidal wave of legal and financial blowback. Harrison Crane, the developer from Crestview Homes, was a pragmatist. The moment his own legal team confirmed the situation, he jettisoned the HOA. He called Amelia directly. Ms. Thorne, he said, his voice stripped of its earlier slickness and now purely transactional. It appears we were dealing with the wrong party, a regrettable situation. But my company still wishes to develop that land. It's a prime parcel. Let's bypass the drama. Name your price. Amelia sat in her office, looking at the rolling hills of her family farm through the window. Mr. Crane, she replied coolly, my farm is not, and will never be, for sale. However, I may have another real estate opportunity for you in the near future. A much larger one. I'll keep you informed. She hung up, leaving the developer in a state of confused suspense. The special meeting was standing room only. The entire community of Oakwood Creek seemed to have crammed into the clubhouse, their faces a mixture of fear, anger, and morbid curiosity. The board members sat at a table at the front, looking pale and defeated. Abernathy was conspicuously absent. Amelia walked to the podium at precisely 7:00 p.m. She wore a simple, dark business dress. She radiated a quiet, unassailable authority. Thank you for coming, she began, her voice calm and clear, amplified by a small microphone. As per the notice, this is a special meeting called by the Master Declarant. Let's begin. Motion 1. The immediate and permanent dissolution of the current Board of Directors on the grounds of gross negligence, fiduciary malfeasance, and acting outside the scope of their legal authority. All in favor, she didn't wait for a vote. She simply looked at the defeated board members. One by one, they gave limp, resigned nods. Motion passed. Amelia declared, "You are relieved of your duties, effective immediately. Please leave your keys and records on the table." Motion 2, the appointment of Amelia Thorne as the sole interim director and president of the Oakwood Creek Homeowners Association, pending a full restructuring. All in favor. She looked out at the silent, stunned crowd. As the sole holder of declarant rights, I vote aye. Motion passed. A wave of gasps and murmurs swept through the room. Motion 3, she continued, her voice cutting through the noise. The immediate and unequivocal nullification of the land sale agreement between the previous board and Crestview Homes concerning Parcel 7B, otherwise known as the Thorne Farm. The property is and remains the private holding of the Thorne family. Any funds received from Crestview Homes are to be returned within 5 business days. She paused, letting the finality of her words settle. Her farm was officially hers again, but she was just getting started. Now, she said, shifting her tone slightly, I understand many of you are concerned. You've been told a story about a belligerent farmer trying to disrupt your community. The truth is, my family's legacy was stolen by a desperate and corrupt board to cover a series of profound financial failures. To that end, I have a final announcement. Effective immediately, I have authorized a full, independent, forensic audit of this HOA's finances going back 10 years. Every invoice, every contract, every check will be examined. She looked directly at the former board members. If that audit uncovers any evidence of fraud, embezzlement, or personal enrichment, I will turn it over to the district attorney's office. This is not a negotiation. It is a restoration of order. The homeowner stared at her, not with fear anymore, but with a dawning, shocked respect. She wasn't a conqueror bent on destruction. She was a force of nature, a hurricane of competence that had arrived to wipe out the rot that had been festering in their community for years. The results of the forensic audit came back 3 weeks later, and they were far worse than Amelia had imagined. The HOA wasn't just broke. It was a black hole of debt and deceit. Abernathy and his cronies had been using the HOA as their personal slush fund for years. They had taken out second and third mortgages on the community's common properties, the clubhouse, the pool, the green spaces to fund vanity projects and cover their tracks. They had multiple undisclosed loans from predatory lenders at exorbitant interest rates. The organization was insolvent to the tune of several $1 million. It was a house of cards, and Amelia hadn't just taken it over. She was now responsible for its crushing, inevitable collapse. She sat in a conference room with David, her senior lawyer. The damning audit report spread between them. They're bankrupt, she said, a sense of grim finality in her voice. Legally, the corporation is worthless. In fact, it's a massive liability. Yes, David agreed. Under North Carolina law, you have a few options. You could spend years trying to fix it, raising dues to astronomical levels to pay off the debt, which would crater property values, or repair, Amelia prompted, a new audacious thought beginning to form in her mind. Or, the lawyer said, a slow smile spreading across his face as he realized where her mind was going. You could exercise your right as the declarant and primary creditor to petition the court to place the HOA into receivership, force a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, liquidate the corporation's assets to pay off the debts. Amelia stared at him, the full, breathtaking scope of the ultimate revenge becoming clear. Liquidate the assets. What are the HOA's assets? The common properties, David said, his eyes gleaming. The clubhouse we're sitting in, The pool, the tennis courts, the parks, every road, every sidewalk, every street lamp in the entire 500-home development, everything that isn't a privately owned house and lot, the entire infrastructure that holds the community together. Amelia stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the sprawling, pristine neighborhood that had tried to consume her farm. They had tried to steal her 200 acres. Now, she had the power to seize the very ground their kingdom was built on. "So we forced them into bankruptcy," she said, her voice quiet and intense. "And in a liquidation sale, who can bid on the assets?" "Anyone," David replied. "A private equity firm, a developer, or you." A brilliant, triumphant smile finally lit up Amelia's face. It wasn't the smile of a victim who had gotten justice. It was the smile of a Wall Street predator who had just spotted the deal of a lifetime. "Forget bidding," she said, turning back to him. "Let's prepare a prospectus. We're not just going to liquidate the assets. We're going to bundle them. The roads, the land, the infrastructure, the management rights, all of it. We're going to sell the entire Oakwood Creek development as a turnkey investment opportunity to the highest bidder. Get Harrison Crane on the phone. Tell him that larger real estate opportunity I mentioned just came on the market." The news of the impending Chapter 7 bankruptcy and liquidation fell upon the 500 homes of Oakwood Creek, not like a bombshell, but like a neutron bomb. The houses were left standing. But everything that made them a community, everything that gave their property value its foundation, was vaporized. The legal notices, delivered by certified mail and posted on the clubhouse door, now chained by a court-appointed receiver, were stark and merciless. They detailed how the HOA Corporation was insolvent and how all its assets, every road they drove on, every blade of grass into the parks, the pool, the tennis courts, the very streetlights that illuminated their nights, would be bundled together and sold at auction to the highest bidder to satisfy the corporation's creditors. Panic, cold and suffocating, set in. The neighborhood that had smugly watched one woman lose her farm now faced a collective financial apocalypse. Their property values, once a source of pride, were now tethered to an anchor of uncertainty being dropped into the abyss. Who would buy their roads? What if a private equity firm from New York bought their park and turned it into a paid admission facility? What if the new owners simply shut off the streetlights to save money their homes? Once part of a pristine master-planned community, were about to become isolated islands in a sea of privately owned infrastructure, their fate entirely in the hands of a stranger. A hastily called, unofficial community meeting took place on the lawn in front of the locked clubhouse. It was a scene of chaos and recrimination. Neighbors who had once argued over the acceptable shade of mailbox shutters were now shouting at each other, desperate to find someone to blame. The former board members, stripped of their power, became the focal point of the community's rage. "You did this," a man screamed at Gerald, the former vice president, his face purple with fury. "You let Abernathy run wild. You signed the papers." Gregory Abernathy himself made a brief, disastrous appearance. He tried to address the crowd, to explain, to deflect, but his words were drowned out by a tidal wave of fury. "Thief," they shouted. "You ruined us." He was pelted with a half-eaten granola bar and a water bottle before he retreated to his car. A pathetic, fallen despot chased from his own ruined kingdom by the citizens he had betrayed. They had followed him into ruin, and now they were tearing him apart for it. While Oakwood Creek descended into chaos, Amelia Thorne was operating into the cold, quiet world of high finance she knew so well. She and her team were not preparing for a simple asset sale. They were crafting a masterpiece of financial packaging. They created a sleek, glossy prospectus, complete with satellite imagery, demographic data, and cash flow projections. They didn't call it the assets of the bankrupt Oakwood Creek HOA. They branded it the Oakwood Creek Residential Management Portfolio. The prospectus reframed the narrative. The 500 homes were not a community. They were a stable residential base with a captive revenue stream. The HOA dues were not community fees, they were service and access tariffs with significant upward potential. The document was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak, designed to appeal to the most unsentimental and predatory of investors. It was a prospectus for buying a kingdom. Amelia's first call was to Harrison Crane. "Mr. Crane, Amelia Thorne," she said when the developer answered. "That larger real estate opportunity I mentioned, it's on the market. I'm sending over the prospectus now. It's the chance to acquire the management rights and all common assets for the entire 500-home Oakwood Creek development. The sealed bid auction is in 10 days. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Crane, a man who had built his career on calculated aggression, was speechless. He understood immediately the breathtaking scale of what she had done. She hadn't just taken back her farm. She hadn't just bankrupted the HOA. She had bundled their entire universe into a product and was now offering to sell it to him. It was a move of such corporate ruthlessness that he couldn't help but be impressed. "My God, Miss Thorne," he finally said, a note of pure, unadulterated admiration in his voice. "You didn't bring a knife to a gunfight. You brought a tactical nuclear weapon. Send it over. You have my full attention." The day of the auction was a formality conducted in the sterile quiet of a federal bankruptcy court. The bids had been submitted electronically by the deadline. The court-appointed receiver, a humorless man in a rumpled suit, stood before a small gathering that included Amelia, her legal team, and representatives for the handful of bidders. The homeowners of Oakwood Creek were not present. They had no standing here. Their fate was being decided in a room they couldn't even enter. A desperate, last-ditch attempt by some residents to form a coalition and buy back their own community had failed spectacularly, their pooled resources amounting to less than a tenth of the asset's lowest valuation. They were plankton trying to outbid a great white shark. The receiver announced the results. There had been 3 serious bids, one from a Texas-based real estate investment trust, one from a Chicago private equity firm, and one from Crestview Homes. After reviewing the submitted qualified bids, the receiver intoned, "The winning bid for the complete asset portfolio of the Oakwood Creek HOA is awarded to Crestview Homes for a sum of $17 million. Amelia felt a quiet, cold satisfaction. The circle was now complete. The very developer who had colluded with the HOA to pave over her family's legacy now owned the HOA and everything in it. The irony was a dish served not cold, but flash frozen. The $17 million payment would first go to satisfy the HOA's secured creditors. And as the primary creditor who had bought the original debt, Amelia and her holding company stood to receive the lion's share of the proceeds. She had not only gotten her land back, but she had been paid handsomely for the trouble. The following week, Harrison Crane called his first community meeting as the new owner of Oakwood Creek. He stood at a podium on the clubhouse lawn, the very spot where Amelia had announced her takeover. But his tone was vastly different. He was not a neighbor. He was not a leader. He was an investor. And they were his investment. "Good evening," he began, his voice devoid of warmth. "I am Harrison Crane, CEO of Crestview Homes, the new owner of the Oakwood Creek Common Properties and Governing Rights. Let's be clear about the new reality. My company has made a significant investment here, and we expect a return on that investment." He laid out the changes. HOA dues would be immediately increased by 75% to reflect the true cost of services and to fund necessary capital improvements. A private management company would be brought in to enforce all covenants with zero tolerance. Violations would result in steep, non-negotiable fines. The community pool and tennis courts would now operate on a tiered membership basis, with premium fees for access. This is no longer a non-profit association, he concluded, his gaze sweeping over their horrified faces. This is a business. We are your new landlord. We expect you to be good tenants. Welcome to the new Oakwood Creek. The residents stared at him in stunned silence. The full, crushing weight of their fate finally landed on them. They had traded a bumbling, corrupt board they could have, in theory, voted out for a permanent, corporate overlord whose only motive was profit. They were trapped. Their petty grievances over lawns and mailboxes seemed like a paradise lost compared to the iron-fisted corporate serfdom they now faced. They had tried to steal a small farm and, in the process, had sold their entire kingdom into bondage. Amelia was not at the meeting. She didn't need to be. Her war was over. That evening, as the sun set, she walked the fence line of her farm. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and pine. On the other side of the fence, in the sprawling suburb below, she could see the lights of the houses flicker on. It looked the same as it always had, but she knew that everything had changed. The people over there were now living with the consequences of their leadership's greed. They were now the ones who would go to sleep every night worrying about the ground beneath their feet, knowing it belonged to someone else. She knelt down and scooped up a handful of dark soil. It was cool and solid in her hand. This was real. This was what mattered. It was the legacy her father had left her, the history her great-grandfather had built. She had faced down the machine that had tried to grind it into dust and had fed the machine to itself. She let the soil run through her fingers. The anger was gone. The need for revenge sated. All that remained was a profound, quiet peace. She had her farm back, and on the other side of the fence, the lesson had been delivered. 6 months had passed. Spring had come to the Carolina Hills, and the Thorne farm was awakening with a vibrant, defiant life. The fields, once threatened with the sterile uniformity of suburban lawns, were now lush with the green shoots of organic soybeans. Amelia, dressed in worn jeans and a faded work shirt, her hands stained with the rich, dark soil, had found the rhythm she thought she had lost forever. The quiet mornings, the long afternoons under the sun, the deep satisfaction of physical labor, it was the peace her father had cherished, a legacy she had rescued from the jaws of corporate greed. The saga of Oakwood Creek had faded into a cautionary tale whispered in neighboring towns. Gregory Abernathy was a ghost, having declared personal bankruptcy and moved away in the dead of night, his reputation a smoldering ruin. The residents of the development next door were now living in the cold. Efficient world Harrison Crane had built for them. Their neighborhood was cleaner, the rules were stricter, and the bushel was gone, replaced by the simmering resentment of the managed. From her hilltop, Amelia could sometimes see the private security patrols Crane had implemented, their vehicles moving slowly along the streets like sharks in a vast, unhappy aquarium. She felt a distant, detached pity for them, the kind a general might feel for the civilian populace of a conquered territory. Her war was over. She had won. One afternoon, as she was repairing a stretch of fence line, a sleek, black German sedan crunched up her gravel driveway. It was a vehicle that screamed money and power, entirely out of place in her rustic world. Harrison Crane stepped out. He was not dressed in his usual developer's polo shirt, but in a tailored dark suit. He looked not like a man coming for a fight, but like a banker coming for a meeting. Amelia watched him approach, her hand resting on a heavy fence post, her expression neutral. She felt no fear, no anger. He was a piece of the past, a ghost from a war that had already been won. "Ms. Thorne," he said, stopping a respectful 10 feet away. He gave a slight nod, a gesture of deference from one victor to another. "The farm looks good, better than it would have with 150 houses on it." "It does," Amelia replied, her voice even. "What do you want, Mr. Crane?" "To offer my professional admiration," he said, his voice genuine. "I've been in the development game for 20 years. I've seen hostile takeovers, zoning battles, corporate espionage. I have never, ever seen anything as elegant and utterly devastating as what you did to that HOA. It was a masterpiece." "They stole my land," Amelia said simply, as if that explained everything. "They did," Crane agreed. "Crane. And you took their entire world as payment. I respect that. In our business, there are sheep and there are wolves, and they were sheep who thought wearing a wolf pelt made them predators. You reminded them of the difference." He paused, his expression shifting from admiration to pure business. Which is why I'm here. I'm a wolf, Miss Thorne, and so are you. And wolves know when to take their kill and move on to the next hunt. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a slim, beautifully bound document, its cover a deep, corporate blue. It was another prospectus. I've had my fun with Oakwood Creek, he said, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. I've restructured the debt, tripled the revenue from fines and fees, and locked the residents into long-term service contracts with my subsidiaries. The asset is now performing at peak efficiency. I have squeezed every last drop of juice from that lemon. It's time to sell. Amelia stared at him, a strange, cold stillness settling over her. You're selling the development, the residential management portfolio. Yes. He corrected her. I'm selling the whole package, the common lands, the infrastructure, the management rights, the revenue streams. My analysts project its value has increased by 40% since my acquisition. I'm taking my profit and moving on to a much larger project in Florida. He took a step closer, holding out the prospectus. And as a professional courtesy from one wolf to another, I wanted to give you the first right of refusal. Before I take this to the open market, I wanted to offer you the chance to buy it. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The quiet satisfaction she had felt moments before was being invaded by a ghost she thought she had exorcised, the ghost of the Wall Street analyst she used to be. The part of her that didn't see land, but saw assets. The part that didn't feel peace, but felt the thrill of a closing deal. Why would I want to buy Oakwood Creek? She asked. But her voice lacked conviction. Her eyes were fixed on the sleek prospectus in his hand. Why wouldn't you? Crane countered, a slick smile playing on his lips. It's the ultimate victory, the final poetic justice. The community that tried to devour you becomes your personal property, your revenue stream, your kingdom. You already have the farm. This gives you the castle, the moat, and the village that pays you tribute. You could be their queen, or you could just sit back, install a management company, and cash the checks. It's a turnkey operation, a cash machine. He laid the prospectus on the fence post between them. The numbers are all in there, he said softly. The return on investment is substantial. Amelia looked away from him, out at her fields. She saw her father's face, remembered his rough hands, his love for this soil. This was peace. This was sanctuary. This was what she had fought for, to come home. To be free of the world of men like Harrison Crane. But then, her gaze drifted back to the prospectus, the numbers, the ROI, the deal. A forgotten hunger stirred within her, a primal thrill she hadn't felt in months. The farmer who had wanted peace was at war with the analyst who lived for the kill. She had dismantled one company with brutal efficiency. The thought of owning it, of running it, of optimizing its assets, it was not a repulsive one. It was interesting. Crane saw the flicker in her eyes. He knew he had her. The hunt is the best part, isn't it, Miss Thorne, he whispered, as if sharing a secret. But owning the kill is what makes it all worthwhile. Think about it. He gave her another nod, then turned and walked back to his car, leaving the prospectus sitting on the fence post. A serpent in her garden. He drove away, leaving her alone in the silence of her farm. For a long time, Amelia did not move. She was torn between two worlds, two identities. The woman who held the soil, and the woman who analyzed the balance sheet. She had told herself this war was about justice, about legacy, about protecting her home. But what if it had been about something else? What if it had simply been about winning? And what if, after the ultimate victory, peace felt a little, pouring slowly? She reached out, her dirt-stained fingers, the fingers of a farmer, closed around the crisp, cool, corporate blue of the prospectus. She brought it closer, her eyes scanning the cover sheet. A slow smile spread across her face. It was not the warm, peaceful smile of a woman content on her land. It was the sharp, calculating, triumphant smile of a predator who has just been shown a fresh, wounded, and very profitable new prey. Her name was Amelia Thorne. She was home. But as she stood there, with her father's land at her feet and a new empire in her hands, she wondered if home wasn't the soil at all. Maybe home was the hunt. In the end, this was a story of ultimate consequence. The HOA gambled with the wrong person's legacy and lost their entire kingdom. It's a powerful lesson in strategy, showing that the greatest weapon isn't anger, but intelligence. Thank you for watching. If you love a story of epic revenge, subscribe, like, and comment below.